Good afternoon and welcome to the monthly briefing for the month of May on Internet governance and digital policy for our friends here in Geneva and for hubs in Jakarta. It's well, evening time at around 6 o'clock. Our new hub in Tunis, which is in the same time zone, and our friends in Rio, for whom it is early morning. As you know, every month we try to summarize the major developments in digital policy and internet governance to see what are the key trends, what are the key activities and main events. Within the 20 minutes of the global briefing, plus the regional briefings that the all hubs will have separately, we try to summarize and somehow put in the context this whole flow of events, developments in digital policy around the major pillars of internet governance policy. I suggest for those of you who are online, you can access the PDF version of the digital watch for the last month, for the month of May, and it was just published this morning. And in the middle you have the so-called barometer, which is the basis, internet governance barometer, which is the basis for our monthly briefing. We'll start with the, Arvin, could you just go to the next slide, please? We'll start with a quick summary of the major developments during the month of May. As you know, there were events, regional events, Fast Africa versus Forum, which was attended by few colleagues who are today in the room, LACNIC in Havana, CSTD 19 sessions, which was also hosted here in Geneva, IEEE International Symposium on Technologies for Homeland Security, ITUD Global Symposium for Regulation, Belarus Internet Governance Forum. One interesting event which somehow was not on the radar of the IG community, it was a UNID 2020 meeting in New York, basically discussing identity in the implementation of the SDGs 16.9, which has the one of the aim that every person on the globe should have a legal identity. And this issue has obviously numerous digital consequences, and digital was mentioned very often. It was, the event was hosted in New York, and we'll reflect later on more on it. There was also another IEEE symposium on security and privacy. They have been quite busy. RIPE 72 meeting in Copenhagen, Swiss IGF in Bern, and ITU Council, which is going right now. Quite a few colleagues apologize that they cannot make to our briefing because of the parallel negotiations on the drafting committees. This is more or less the summary of the major developments. Now Arvin will move quickly, we'll go through the second slide, which is the first part of barometer, third slide, and we'll go directly to the global IG architecture. When it comes to global IG architecture, there are three important events that we highlighted about various developments. The first was G7 meeting in Japan, which welcomed the UNGG report, which reaffirms that no country should conduct or knowingly support ICT-enabled theft of intellectual property. Also, they supported the principle that international law applies to the internet. Those few principles that have been gaining momentum over the last few months. There was the first US and China senior expert meeting on the question of the norms, international norms of state behavior and other issues related to international security and cybersecurity. If you can recall our September briefing, there was a bit of tension between China and the US related to the espionage and the theft of intellectual property. It was settled during the visit of Chinese president to the United States, and then it was introduced in Antalya conclusions of G20 meeting. It was now again repeated in G7 that it is against the international law, the use of the state surveillance capacity for the international theft and for benefits of the private companies. Now, at that point, when there was sort of tension between US and China, they stopped their regular consultations. They now renew it, and this is the first meeting on the expert level. United States warned about the fragmentation of the internet as a result of new Chinese regulation on domain names. As you know, there is a new Chinese regulation requesting the all registers and whoever wants to register a domain name to go through the state structure, to have the government sort of structure which is supporting the whole request for registration, and it was criticized by the United States, by Larry Strickland and Ambassador Sulpaveda as practice which is going against the overall the general practice in the international community, where that's all stakeholders have some sort of say in the way how the domain names are managed. Next, Arvin. Sustainable development was in the focus of Versus Forum. It was one of the most intensive events trying to bridge the Sustainable Development Goals, 17 Sustainable Development Goals, and the ICT sector, including the Versus plus 10 action lines. And that was the core architecture of the meeting, and there was all action lines were basically inbuilt, and what was interesting is the matrix which was created in order to fit all workshops and discussions in this dynamics. And we have the report from the Versus plus 10 meeting, which Teresa has been providing here, summarizing the major developments and what was discussed around the issues of e-commerce, sustainable development, cybersecurity, and other related issues. We will have now our colleagues in Jakarta who will update us briefly on the master plan of Asian connectivity, ASEAN connectivity, basically ASEAN countries in the implementation of SDGs and general growth of the digital in ASEAN. Introduce master plan on ASEAN connectivity. Could we hear more from Jakarta about this master plan? Okay, while we're waiting, I will basically read what our colleagues from Jakarta summarized, that ASEAN is currently preparing master plan of ASEAN connectivity for 2025. The existing master plan of ASEAN connectivity, which adopted in 2010, highlighted some challenges on developing ASEAN ICT infrastructure and bridging digital divides. The new plan will include the issue of digital innovation, which focuses on how to increase financial access through digital technologies, increase the adoption of technologies by SMEs, and enhance the impact of open data across ASEAN countries. As you know, and you will see later on, the ASEAN countries, ASEAN region is one of the regions of high dynamism in digital development, both in the terms of e-commerce, access, innovation, and new industries. And this is an interesting framework, their master plan for the future development. Next. On security, we have the first Chinese committee associated with Internet Control Bureau is intensifying scrutinizing foreign technologies, mainly US technologies, which will be used in the Chinese digital market. And it raised some controversies and a lot of discussions about the level, how far this process of scrutinizing technologies can get, including access to the source code, which created some sort of controversies. We have a statistic that over 1 billion stolen credentials in possession of criminals in dark market. There was indication by US intelligence that foreign hackers are spying on presidential candidates during the presidential campaign. And the latest, the major development is that Google introduces a safe HTTP secure for domain blogs on Blogspot and end-to-end encryption to new applications such as Allo and Duo. Now in the institutional field, we have one interesting development that Tunisia is in the process of accession to Budapest Convention. And we would like to hear from our colleagues in Tunis what is the current situation and status of this accession process. Can we have somebody from Tunis, please? But I'll just provide the context. The context is that, you know, Budapest Convention is open for accession to non-Council of Europe member states. And the United States, Japan, Australia are among the members. And now Tunisia is in the process of accession. And we want to hear what is the current situation.
And I will speak about our initiative to adhere as a member in the Convention of Budapest. In fact, we are aiming to establish a healthy environment of investment, and we need to adhere to this convention. For this, we have to establish a cybercrime law in Tunisia. Today we have a proposal that has been drafted by several members from several ministries such as the Ministry of Information, Technology of Information, and the Ministry of Interior, the Ministry of Justice, the Ministry of Defense, and from several institutions. This proposal has not reached consensus yet. We are still working on it. To give an overview about this law, it aims at prevention of crime information and telecommunication and the digital telecommunication systems. It also aims to updating the provisions of collecting electronic evidence. In this law, the ATT, which is the agency, technical agency of telecommunication, which was created in 2013 for the legal interceptions, will perform an important role in this law. She will give the technical support for the implementation of bills related to access to data. Mrs. Khouloud will talk after that of this law of access of data. The challenge today in Tunisia with this law is how to deal with hackers. In fact, there are many activists in the civil society which are pushing to not consider hacking as a criminal act. This is what I have actually for this for the cybercrime. Perhaps some updates will come after, but we are still working on it.
The accession to the Council of Europe, also the development of national infrastructure, national legislation bodies that can interact, because as you know, Council of Europe Convention on Cybercrime has a quite intensive mechanism for interaction, exchange of data, and that's the preparatory process is going on. It's not just a question of signature and ratification, but necessary infrastructure needs to be developed. We will go to the next slide on privacy and human rights. Well, there was one interesting development by Twitter. Twitter is basically providing publicly their materials on overall output of Twitter to the company which, if I'm pronouncing correct, is Datanmir, and then they decided now to have to cut the special supply of that service to U.S. intelligence agencies, which they can get it publicly, because anyone of us can get it publicly on the net. But in order to signal the sort of their distance from the U.S. security intelligence sector, they decided to cut this special access, which intelligence agency can get it anyway publicly, like all of us. Special rapporteur on the promotion and protection of the rights of freedom of opinion and expression warned that the fight against violent extremism could be used as excuse to curb free speech. This has been one of the underlying topics during the previous month, and increasing clear distinction between two aspects of the interplay between internet and the fight against terrorism. One is the question of use of the internet in the preparation and execution of terrorist acts, which there is a general agreement that this is the area where there is a need for a really concrete action. And the other area, which is a bit more vaguer, and there is a delicate line between freedom of expression, is the question of inciting violence online. And that field is carefully worked. The Security Council had one meeting early in May, and it will have another meeting in the beginning of June, discussing that question: what can be done practically in order to curb the violence activism and promotion of the violence extremism online. Private companies are moving stronger in this field. Microsoft basically sent the message: we want to be constructive citizens, we want to help with the fight against violent extremism, but you have to tell us how we can do it without obviously endangering the legal rules and the core business model. Therefore, there is a more and more interest from private sector to play proactive role in this field. On the question of the human rights and accession, the European Parliament, Council and Commission agreed on a new set of rules to make public sector websites and mobile apps more accessible, especially for persons with disabilities. Next. On the question of infrastructure, there is a first nationwide network dedicated to Internet of Things, which is developed and supported by Samsung. It is now launched in South Korea, and network will use a part of an unlicensed public spectrum to connect devices. Another major development when we have the internet companies moving down to the infrastructure, sort of providing of service of infrastructure, is initiative by Facebook and Microsoft to build subsea US-Europe cable project Marea, connecting Virginia and Bilbao, and providing quite substantive data traffic. It has also raised some sort of controversies of a possible monopoly of the internet companies on the level of infrastructure and telecommunication delivery of the services. Telefonica, Spanish leading telecommunication provider, is involved in the process, but this is definitely new development where internet companies are moving also in the field of infrastructure. Then we have the Apple, in order to support transition from IP version 4 to IP version 6, is a very concrete step. They require that future apps submitted to Apple have support for the IP version 6, and this is another push for this transition. We have also new legislation by United States, state of Arizona, to require state institutions to migrate their IT resources and operation to the cloud. Now, we planned initially, but I would suggest that we skip that to hear from our colleagues in Tunisia about MENA developments and about the really controversial question of the regulation and the ban of voice over IP in Morocco. As you can recall, a few months ago we started following this process, and there is a ban. Three main Moroccan telecom operators. I will read what our colleagues from Tunisia prepared as an update from the region. Morocco Telecom, Meditel, and Indi colluded in early January to ban voice over internet protocol, voice over IP. Not only does the recent decision to ban voice over IP in Morocco limit the free flow of communication exchange, but it also affects consumer trust in domestic telecom operators. Knowing the limits purchase capacity of Moroccan consumers, and minimum wage stands about $300 US, voice over IP services cater for low-income households to communicate with their families locally and abroad.
Thanks to organize the hub in Tunis. Thanks for DiploFoundation. Thanks for ATI to host the hub. So my name is Hamza Branks. I'm from IGMN. I will talk about the controversial issues of voice over IP development in the MENA region. I will begin by bad news because voice over IP is cut in 3 countries in the MENA region. It is cut in Morocco, and it is cut in Egypt, and it is cut as well in Jordan. So, but I think in voice over IP you can still use voice over IP in Tunisia, so you can use WhatsApp and Viber and over the top systems. But early this year, Morocco Telecom, Meditel, and Inui, who are the major telecom regulators in Morocco, they have blocked the use of WhatsApp and Viber, which is a problem because the use of voice over IP in Morocco is one of the fastest and growing markets, and they have more than 44 million users of voice over IPs, and the Morocco mobile telecom penetration in Morocco is more than 135%. So this is a problem for people wanting to use the voice over IP as a free service. And now the arguments of the voice over IP voice over or the telecom regulators in Morocco is that they are losing a lot of money. They cannot really generate net profit. So and the problem is that you have a lot of diasporas, Moroccan diasporas living abroad in Europe, so they cannot really do and call their families back in their home country, so they cannot really do international calls or domestic calls. Well, there is 2 anchors here. I mean, the telco operators say that it's an economic issue; they are losing a lot of money, and the other perspective are saying that these people, we have to regulate the markets for these people to pay money for cryptos. And the problem is that the purchasing power of the Moroccan people is very low. It's $288 US, which is really, really controversial. So it's certainly, I don't know if there is like, what is the business model that should be imposed here or developed, or is the policy perspective? I think it's, we still have, there were campaigns in Morocco calling and advocating for the free use of voice over IPs, but still in Morocco.
Okay, Luca, could you tell us what is the situation in Brazil? We heard from Hamza that motivation is mainly economic, and internet telecommunication companies are trying to regain some profit which they lost. What is the current situation with WhatsApp ban in Brazil? Go ahead, Luca.
On the one hand, we had WhatsApp blocking that was enacted by a judge in the course of an investigation for drug traffic using existing Marco Civil provisions. And on the other hand, starting from the beginning of this month, the Brazilian lower house is analyzing one of the bill proposed CPI side report that actually allows to block website hosted abroad in case of cybercrime. So there is an exception for instant messaging applications, but these could be obviously misused to block, to unduly block foreign websites, and this would go against the current net neutrality provisions within Marco Civil that do not allow blocking. So the blocking, the application blocking that has been taking place so far was what has been called a disproportional application of the existing civil provision. But this could be actually amplified if the bill proposed by the CPI Cyber are actually approved by the Brazilian Congress in the forthcoming months.
Thank you, Luca. I can see that we have now the dynamics, and we can see that the similar challenges are faced in Morocco with the voice over IP services. We have challenges also in Indonesia. Recently there was the question of Tambir and Netflix, banning of the Netflix services. And we have Brazil with the question of WhatsApp. Now, as you can see, there are different motivations for the banning of the filtering of services. Some are mainly financial when it comes to Morocco. The other more juridical when it comes to Brazil. And Indonesia, I said what I learned from our colleagues. It's also the question of the financial question with different parts of the economy being challenged by this type of new services. So this is definitely a trend that we have to follow. It gets various, let's say, packaging. One is the question of fragmentation. We've been hearing a lot about the fragmentation. There will be a session of the next Eurodig meeting, but this is related mainly. And we can see that it is the trend which we have in Asia, in Africa, and in Latin America. Next slide, Armin, please. We will have a net neutrality. The net neutrality, as you can see, hasn't been that busy recently. There was the request by companies to reveal the evaluation of zero rating plans to FCC, and there is also a question of India's telecom regulators to introduce a new policy that could provide access to the internet. As you know, the internet telecom regulator banned the Facebook service, which was supposed to provide limited access to the internet. Now they are revisiting this issue by providing also trying to introduce new policy for the future similar situation. Next. So, on the e-commerce and internet economy, the new was, well, coming from Greece, but not only from Greece. There is a tendency. The Greek government passes a package of tax reforms, and which includes a tax of on internet use. I don't know if it is going to solve the financial difficulties in Greece, but and as we mentioned, there is a new report by Google and Temasek estimated that internet economy in Southeast Asia has potential to reach 200 billion by 2025. Therefore, this is a fast-growing market, which is of interest for many internet companies. Next, please. On the question of jurisdiction on the legal issues, which is the next in our list, there was Google managed to win a legal battle against Oracle over Google's use of Java. They won it on the basis of the fair use of the Java technology. According to reports, Russia is seeking Chinese expertise in internet management. Chinese and Russian officials discussed China Internet Sovereignty Model and content control at the 7th Internet Safe Internet Forum, International Internet Forum, which was held in Russia. Therefore, there is some sort of cooperation and exchange of practices and know-how in this field. On IANA transition, which is the next topic in this field, there is the ICANN board adopted new set of ICANN bylaws required as a result of recommendation in the IANA stewardship transition process and accountability proposals. And the new bylaws relate to empowerment community and the creation of post-transition IANA entities, a separate legal entity. And probably the latest development was related to Senator Rubio requests to postpone the transition process. As you may know, as you may follow, there was a hearing at the US Congress where basically he was challenged by quite a few experts from the internet community who argued that it was timely to make transition and as it is planned by 30th of September, and there is still uncertainty if it is going to be postponed for 1 or even 2 years according to the latest contract. We have now on the list of the activities also the map of the major developments during the month of June. We have now IQ Council, which will finish its activities on the 2nd of June. And this is, we can hear from our colleagues who are attending it, but this is basically, we can say business as usual, a bit of discussion of internet governance, a bit of discussion, there was discussion on DONA, there were a few other topics related to SDGs and the resolutions, this is resolution. There will be African Internet Summit in Gaborone between till the 10th of June. Global E-commerce Summit between 31st of May and 1st of June in Barcelona. 1st of June and 2nd of June World Economic Forum ASEAN meeting in Kuala Lumpur. One important event, 6th and 7th of June, first multi-stakeholder science and technology forum at the UN in New York, which will try to link this discussion and technological developments. On the 9th and 10th, Eurobid meeting in Brussels, quite important meeting for the European Internet Governance community. 13th and 15th, 11th Internet Security Forum in Geneva, which will have 2 sessions dedicated to cybersecurity, not as many as it had in the past. There will be a Human Rights Council between 13th of June and the 1st of July, and we expect a report of the Special Rapporteur of Freedom of Expression and some update on developments in the field of privacy. 21st and 23rd of June, OECD ministerial meeting in Cancun, as we have been already discussing, quite important for developments in e-commerce. ICANN meeting in Helsinki, between 27th and 30th of June, with CEO basically having his first ICANN major meeting, new CEO from Sweden. And in Shanghai, in China, Mobile World Congress on between 29th of June and 1st of July. As you can see, generally speaking, we are facing acceleration of digital developments. And if you just zoom out and see what's going on in the different fields, same issues or similar issues are discussed in different fora. They're discussed here in Geneva, in the UN meetings, they're discussing various professional events, non-governmental events, and it is increasingly difficult to get the hold of all of these developments and to have some sort of cognitive consonance that we've been trying to do through this Internet Barometer and Internet briefings. What will be the major challenge in forthcoming period is to see how discussions within privacy in one forum can affect discussions in other forums, how that interplay can be managed in the most effective. Okay, comments, questions from our local community here in Geneva. I guess you have been busy with the ITU meeting, spending quite a bit of time at the ITU Council meeting. Okay. We don't have any comment on the question from here. We had a bit of technical difficulties with our hubs, and I would prefer that we don't. If there is any question, we can just read our comment. Okay, now we have the astrologist in our team. We should start using some sort of horoscope for the IG and for our briefings. Okay, well, with that, with this summary of the major developments, I would like then to conclude our discussion. We'll have some refreshment here and the time for the informal exchanges, please.
May I just ask one question? Thank you, Johan, as usual, for this very important monthly update. On the net neutrality, I wondered whether you could say a few more words on especially on the very brief notion here that India is looking into new ways of providing some free access after the idea of what Internet.org did not fly with the regulators in India. Maybe if you have some more insights on this one, that would be pretty interesting. Thank you.
Okay, now I will reveal you a bit of our sort of modus operandi. As you can see, we have very detailed summary of all developments. Then we distill into the PowerPoint and the major developments. Therefore, you can find it on the net. But this is useful in this one. Okay, what is basically happening in India? The Indian telecom regulator is exploring options to provide free internet without violating net neutrality rules. They prepared the consultation paper on free data, exploring three basically major models. The first model is toll-free platform for users where browsing will be free. Basically, completely free access, no payments, no charges. And browsing can be not limited as Facebook limit to the few number of websites. The second one is a scheme in which consumer prepay for the service but are then reimbursed by the government. They're speaking about their national arrangement. And application that offer user recharge incentives. I really don't know what we can send in the follow-up, but these are three proposals from there is a link to their paper. A pre-consultation paper is expected to be released the end of the month. Then they will start the public debate by 21st of June, and it will be the input for the new regulation, which should bridge this gap between free access to the internet and no limitation, which were challenged by Facebook, but Facebook just limited. It is a bit, I have to provide more information on it, but this is probably these are three models which they are now exploring. It would be interesting also for other developing countries to see how it will work. Richard?
Yes, I've looked at that in some detail, and my colleagues in India have obviously looked at it much closer. Actually, the civil society activists who were campaigning for the first regulation for the banning of free basics, they're very disappointed. It seems that it's a reversal by the regulator from their point of view. And the regulator is justifying that. There's a paper and there's an interview. The interview with the regulator is actually more interesting because he's saying where he's coming from. He seems to be saying that the initial decision was based on the fact that the free basics was linked to a particular telecom supplier. And if you can find a method that is free but is not linked to a particular telecom supplier, but it's across all telecom suppliers, then that might be okay. So on the one hand, it seems reasonable because you're not, the problem is the telecom supplier has a control of the infrastructure, so it's kind of a monopoly, and that was a problem. And so if you get rid of that and you say it goes to everybody, maybe it's okay, but you still have the fundamental issue that you're locking people in to some kind of free services which are limited and controlled by the people giving the freedom. So I expect that when they do the consultation, they'll have immense resistance from the same people who were fighting against free basics, so it's not clear what will happen. And then the kind of cynical political comment is some of you saw that Zuckerberg went and saw the Prime Minister, and some people suspect that this might have something to do with it, although the regulator is supposed to be independent, so, you know, who knows. But it's definitely worth watching because it could influence other countries, for sure.
Okay, thank you, Richard. We definitely should keep it on the radar to see what is the development when it comes to net neutrality and India and free basics. Well, that's you had.
And I think it's somewhat linked, actually. It's the question that was brought up in Morocco of the question that was brought up in Morocco of banning the voice over IP, essentially because it's depriving the local telcos of revenue. And that comes back to some of you know, the old termination rate problem. If I own infrastructure, how do I recover the price of that infrastructure? And one way I recover it is by not letting other telecom operators use it unless they pay me. So I don't collect the money just from my customers, I also collect it from customers of other telecom suppliers who are using my premises. The kind of termination rates have sort of gone down and are not very favorable. The OECD, for example, argues against them because there's an obvious abuse of monopoly power. If I only own the infrastructure in the country, then I can set the termination rate very high, and I'll have problems. But I still think it's a legitimate question, which has been raised repeatedly by telco operators. They can't just give the infrastructure away for free. So how are they compensated for the use of their infrastructure? If it's not termination rates, maybe there has to be some other system. And that's all tied with net neutrality, because net neutrality came up because operators were starting to block things that they felt used a lot of bandwidth and that they weren't getting compensated for. And so the Skype and WhatsApp, and it's all part of the same problem. Netflix, it's all part of the same thing. How do you recover some money for the use of your infrastructure?
Therefore, one of the probably points is that the question of filtering and ban is basically financially motivated, although it may get some sort of content of jurisdiction on the legal trappings, but underlying logic is the telecom operators or monopolies in some countries are basically concerned that they're losing the part of their profit. The new dynamism in this development will be the cable, the transatlantic cable, which was introduced by Facebook and Google, because then we are in a way bypassing the question of telecommunication infrastructure. Therefore, that's probably important to follow what will be developments along these lines. It's also time for announcement, and we have with us today Chengetai from the IGF Secretariat. Chengetai, please.
Thank you very much, Owen. I just wanted to just make some announcements on a few deadlines that are approaching for the IGF Secretariat. We do have the deadline for workshops for IGF 2016 in Guadalajara in Mexico, and the deadline is on June 6th. And there's also deadline for open forums. Open forums are open to governments and international organizations that may wish to showcase or speak about their internet governance related efforts at the IGF annual meeting. And that deadline is June 20th. There's also a IGF retreat that was just announced, and we're going to have this retreat, I think it's the weekend of June 15th, 16th. Okay. Yes. And the deadline July. And the deadline for nominations is June 7th. So people who want to come to the retreat, it's going to be for about 35 people, and we are looking ahead since the IGF mandate was renewed last December for 10 years. We're going to be looking ahead for these 10 years to see what we should do, what we should concentrate on, and if anybody has any ideas on the way forward. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Chengetai. For those of us who unfortunately cannot make to New York, I hope some sort of tweeting from the retreats sometimes are more sort of secluded, but some sort of tweeting, anonymized tweeting would be useful to know what's
Yes, correct. We do plan to have some sort of summary, daily summary, and we might have some tweeting, unattributed tweeting, just to tell the people, the stakeholders, what's going on.
Thank you. Thank you for this good news, because those of you who were following IG discussion, that was a bit of question mark about the concept of a retreat, which is normal in many organizations, but then in a way it is not completely in sync with the complete openness and transparency of some of the IG processes, but that probably would be great bridge between what a retreat is, basically relatively small group of people discussing important issues in an effective way, and having some sort of update for the wider community. For us, who unfortunately, for me, I cannot make it. I will be in Vietnam at that time. Well, with these announcements and these clarifications from Chengetai, I guess we can conclude this monthly briefing, and we hope that we'll have a better technical luck. The technical stars will be aligned better for our next briefing. And best regards to our friends in Tunis, IG MENA Hub, Jakarta Hub, and Brazil Hub. I guess you will continue your discussion about the local developments and local dynamics. Have a nice day. Thank you.